Today I'm going to be giving you guys a mix breakdown of Monday's song called, what's it called? Today I'm going to be giving you guys a mix breakdown of Monday's song, which sounded like this. Writing it down and working it out, sitting right here away from the crowds. Never a thought to what will come next, wondering now if you'll be perplexed. And I do need to thank Trevor Sanders for leaving a comment on that video, actually suggesting this idea. This is something I've been thinking about for a long time, so I'm going to finally do it. So let's get right to it, you guys. All right, so as is the case with many of my Music Monday songs, I usually come into the studio, find some sort of sound on a keyboard or something, and a beat, and I just start working with those things. In this case, this time, I'm going to tell you guys something pretty interesting that I recently figured out, which is how to get sounds off of the GarageBand app on your phone into GarageBand on your iMac. So basically, I had a client who had recorded a song on the iOS version of GarageBand on his phone, right? And then sent me that project. He had saved it and archived it in a way that I could open it on my version of GarageBand on my iMac. When he did that, I noticed that there were sounds on that file that I didn't have in GarageBand. So that's basically all you have to do. Create a file with some sort of sound that is only on the iOS version of GarageBand, save it, then send that file to yourself on your iMac and open it there. Then you'll have those sounds that were only available on iOS, but you do have to save it in the GarageBand version on your iMac. That's the only trick, right? So I have it saved under user patches. It's the first one right here, Faded Keys patch from iOS, as you can see. So now I have all these different sounds, the digital EP, the warm old tape, and everything you see here. These weren't sounds, as far as I know, that I didn't have, at least like this string pluck one that I used for this song, didn't have it before. Let me solo it just so you can hear it. Right? Super 80s. I love that sound. I thought it was super fun when I found it and played with it. So basically, that was the first thing that I played, that little bit you heard. Right? I had just played that. That was basically all I had. And I've been using GarageBand a lot more as a songwriting tool for my Music Monday project. So what I mean by that is I came up with this part. I came up with the beat that I liked under it, and then I just looped it. Then I went away from the computer, started typing out lyrics, well, still on the computer, but then I started working on lyrics, and then at whatever point I was like, okay, this is where I would develop a chorus. I developed that chorus that is in this song, is all those big harmonies, right? And I'll just play that for you. Which by all means isn't like a classic chorus, right? But it was a section B, and it's this, right? I mean, I'm doing whatever I want on Music Monday. That's sort of the fun of it for me. Okay, so I came up with this sound. The drums are coming out of the electro bump sound, and Curtis is an R&B drummer. Don't forget, you can apply any drums you want to any of these players. So I had like basically a player that GarageBand has originally assigned as just like a regular live kit player, but then I put him on this electro bump kit, which is pretty cool. It's got an 80s sound to it, but it's a little bit cooler than, not cooler, but a little more what I wanted than like the Boutique 78 or the Boutique 808, right? It sounds like this. The only thing that I really did to this was I worked the threshold on the compressor a little bit. I just had to compress it just a tiny bit more. It was just peaking a little bit more than I wanted it to. So I just had to tighten that down with the threshold in the compressor. Other than that, I mixed the drums using the regular old mixer that comes down here at the bottom. Very basic. And I, turned up the kick, turned up the snare, all that kind of stuff. cymbals and percussion, hi-hat, all of that stuff came up from 12 o'clock, which is, I believe, where I originally found them, okay? So nothing too tricky there. All right, so let's talk about the other drum kit that I have going here. And so this is for the bridges, of which there are two, and they're two totally different bridges, and we're going to talk about these in detail because they were sort of the most interesting part of the song, in my opinion, right? So one of the things that I wanted to do was really make these bridges totally out of left field. I didn't want them to sound like the rest of the song at all. So in an attempt to do that, I used a completely different drummer using a completely different drum kit, which is this. Right? Standard big rock drums. In fact, yeah, it's on the heavy drum setting. Nothing too interesting here. I might have, yeah, I gave it a little bit of a bump above 2K. You know, where are we? Around 2600 hertz. Just to sort of bring out that snare a little bit. I'll turn this on and off just so you can hear what that sounds like. Pretty standard thing to do. Like, I just wanted a little bit more brightness out of that snare drum. And so I made just the tiniest move. Again, if you're using these preset sounds in GarageBand, my best piece of advice to you is if you're going to manipulate them and change them in any way, that you do it very, very minimally. The more you do those changes, the bigger the changes you make, the more you're going to screw it up. So, right, we don't want to do that. So anyway, that's all I did. Just bump it up around here, around 26 hertz and 2600 hertz, and that brought out the snare. So let's keep going down the line. Bass, like I made that video, how to get killer bass tones. This is the standard modern stack sound, as you can see. Really great sound, and I didn't really do much to it. Now, one thing that I did do to this that I don't always do, because there's a lot of that string noise, as you can hear in there, I gated the hell out of this thing, right? So I actually have it set to where is this negative 16 dB. I mean, this is some seriously hard gating. I've been using the noise gate a lot more in general on GarageBand. I love the presetted one. It just works all the time. I haven't found something where I'm like, nope, that's wrong. It's great on drums. It's great on basses, and especially something like this where these tracks have big spaces between the notes themselves. As you can see down here, let me zoom out a little bit. So there are these big spaces here, and in these spaces, there's a lot of my fingers going over the strings, which I didn't want to hear a ton of. So I just gated it, and that way, when I'm not playing, in theory, the gate is closing, right? And nothing is getting passed through that signal until I play again, right? And I just let you hear that with the gate in your mind. Right? If I turn that gate off, just so you can hear it, it sounds like this. Right? So the gate is doing a ton of work. I'll turn it back on just so you can hear that difference again. Right, and it was loud enough, that string noise was loud enough that I really wanted to gate it because it was like, just, you could hear it in the mix, and I was like, ugh, that's awful, so had to get rid of that. Otherwise, bass tone wasn't too affected. I believe, let's look at the EQ on the bass. I bumped it up a little bit in 625 range. I wanted it to be a little bit more mid-present, just because, you know, the bass tone coming out of my bass, sometimes it needs to be clarified a little bit, and the mids are where it needed in this particular song. Compressor, I just used the standard compressor that's on the amp itself. Nothing too tricky there. Had it turned up kind of high, but nothing too crazy. And that's about it, okay? So let's keep going down the line. Oh, well, these are guitars. We can talk about that when we need to. Lead vocal. Here we go. Let's talk about the vocals. Now, in the case of the vocals, this is pretty much, as far as I know, this is the only place where I used any of my third-party plugins. Everything else was stock GarageBand sounds. The drums, the bass, all the keys and stuff. I didn't put any of my Slate Digital stuff on them. On the vocals, this is just one of the things I've learned to do. I love the Slate Digital stuff on my vocals. I have a preset for myself that just makes it easier, but I will show you. So I do have a vocal rider going. This is from Waves. I don't know if I needed it or not, but it's part of the preset. It was there and it's working. I do like this. It's you know, if you're trying to do a vocal ride, if you've ever sat there and tried to like, you know, one by one do the vocal ride, you know how tedious that can be. So this particular thing, the vocal rider from Waves, which is a nice cheap thing, very useful. Sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. Sometimes you heal and sometimes you bruise. Right? It's grabbing a lot. It's just sort of, I really wanted this to be smooth. I didn't want the vocals to have a ton of dynamics. I really wanted it to be tight in the volume area, you know? So it's working hard there, and it's also working hard in the compression area, which I will show you here. Something is wrong when everything's right. What makes you strong won't last through the night. Holding, right? So you should be able to see it's compressing. Maybe not too hard, but in the medium range. As far as these Slate Digital plugins, you guys know how much I love them. And vocals are hard to get good sounds. I know. This is the tough one. So I came up with a great preset a long time ago that is sort of my go-to for, especially if I'm using the SM7B. This is the preset that I'm just going to open it up and I know that it's going to just sound the way I want it to sound. And I don't have to do a ton of manipulation to, you know, tweak it to the song. But, you know, pretty basic here. Not a ton of EQ, a little bit of a hit right here in the 6.18 kilohertz range. We'll just call that 6 kilohertz. Just a little bit lift in the high mids just to help the clarity come out. You know, this mic can be a little muddy if you don't, let's not use the word muddy. It can be a little bit dark if you don't sort of push a little bit in the high mids. Sometimes, depends on what you want. I also do have a little bit of a distortion running, tiniest bit of distortion running out of this compressor. You really don't hear this distortion, which I love. It just helps push some of the artifacts of the harmonics, the upper harmonics especially. It really does just help clean it up and get it through a mix, especially like this, okay? So same thing here. I doubled the vocals, and so it's two identical takes, panned left and right, -16 and +16. This is a happy range. I'm liking the -16, +16 range for if I'm doing stereo vocals like this, where I want, you know, the double tracks coming out of each speaker. I don't send them too far left and right. I like them to be closer to the middle, and 16 is probably the widest that I've ever pushed them. I'm usually in the like 12 or 10, you know, plus or minus range, which isn't a huge difference, I know, but it was enough. If you pop this mix into mono, if you have that ability, you'll hear what I'm talking about. Like, you don't lose any of the volume or any of the double effect. It's really nice. Plus and minus 16 seems to work really nicely for that doubled vocal coming out of both speakers sound, right? And then on it, Abbey Road. I love these Abbey Road plugins. This thing is so sweet. Holding your head takes more than you thought. It's hitting you hard, it's more than you bought. Breaking it down, do see what it is. Examine the... Boy, my voice sounds a little rough on that take. But, you know, whatever. Music Monday. This is what it is. All right, so let's keep going down. We have the backup vocals, which are all running that same exact preset that we just went through. Oh, no, not exactly the same. There is... Oh, I know what I want to talk about here. Okay, so I wasn't using that Abbey Road reverb. I reserved that specifically for the lead vocal, okay? One of the things that I have learned through Music Monday is how great the reverbs are in the master output channel of GarageBand, right? I've made videos about this before. I'm just going to show you what I'm talking about. Come down here to the master track, right? And I'm going to go to Effects. And we're going to go over to reverb, okay? And I didn't change anything here. You can come in here and change them if you want to, but I didn't, right? I just sort of left it the way it is. I just brightened up the color, maybe extended the time a little bit, and then just one by one, I went through them on these individual channels above and just turned it up, man. Turned it up. These reverbs, you guys, in the master output, those are the best reverbs in GarageBand, if you ask me. They're the most useful, very, very versatile. And when you hear, like, especially when you're doing a bunch of backup vocals like this, it's a pain in the butt to like individually place reverbs on each channel and then try to manipulate them one by one. Do yourselves a favor, just use the reverb in the master bus and don't ever look back. These reverbs are great and they're ideal for this application where you have a ton or, a lot of backup vocals that you want the same exact effect printed on it, right? You have the same parts, basically, backup vocals, and you want them to all have the same effect. It's really easy on your CPU and it's really easy on your workload. So let me just play these so you can hear them. You hear that reverb? That's a really great reverb. I'm going to play the last one because it was a little timed better, but listen to this again. I mean, how great is that? So, all right, so let's keep going down here. Next on the list is that faded key sync. We already talked about that. Airways, another sound. I love this keyboard sound. Super nice and ethereal. I'm not sure if I've used it in a song yet, but I know that I like it. Best thing about this particular sound is that it has that automatic panning effect. Hopefully you could hear that. And just so you know, I'm just going between A major and A minor, A major and A minor. It was just what I wanted to do, man. Right? Super cool effect. That Airways one, really great if you want something that sort of creates a whole new atmosphere by having a panning effect. Really cool. Okay, let's talk about these bridges, okay? So now I've talked about this a lot. When you first open a project, you always need to make sure that you have set the song to the proper key because that will do a couple of things. And most importantly, it will make sure that the auto tuner is tuning your voice correctly to the right key. That's good. But it also allows all the loops in the loop library to they're automatically in the key that you will be working in, right? So keep that in mind when you open your projects. Make sure you set the key and make sure you set the tempo, right? Just make sure you set that key. It's super important. Now, these bridges were all loops, not all loops. I played some bass over it, but here's the bridge. Okay, so I found that loop and I was like, oh, dude, that is so sweet, right? But I didn't want to just drop it in there over the drums. It would just sound too lazy and it wouldn't blend all that well. So here's what I suggest. If you want to use these loops and sort of hide them a little bit in your song, play to them, right? Whatever instrument is whatever you're working with that you can play with that part, play along with that part. In my case, it was the bass part, right? So here, I'm going to add in the bass so we can hear that. Right? So I played along to it and it totally fixed my issue. It, with the drums, the bass, and that loop going, I'm pretty sure I might have convinced a bunch of you that I was actually the person who created that part, but I didn't. Full honesty, didn't do it. Just played along to it. I will say, be careful when you do this. Make sure you're playing really closely to what you're doing, because listen to it again and think about the boo-doo, boo-doo, right? That part in the bass. Let me just play that bass part. This is what I want you to focus on. That one. Ba-doo, right? Listen to this. Right? There's like the horns are sort of they're sort of bleeding into it or leading up into it. There's a timpani sound there that's going ba-doom, ba-doom, right? So my ear grabbed that as like a really important thing to make sure I got into the bass part. That's what I'm saying there, okay? So then we're into another verse, another chorus, another verse, and then we get to this second bridge. Same deal here. This one was made up of loops and guitar parts, okay? So the first loop that I used was this one, the high one. Right? Okay, so that's the first loop I used. Here's the second one that I used. Right? So those are the two loops that I used. Combined, just so you can hear it all combined. Okay, so there we are. We're sort of getting into rap territory with these sounds. Now, what did I play along? Okay, this was super fun. Again, I got the live drummer sound going for the second bridge. The bass is doing this. Right? Got a little distortion going. It's kind of angry sounding. Then started adding in guitar parts using stadium spread, which anybody who watches this channel knows that I love this for my lead guitar tone. It's my go-to sound. It's just always good. So there's a low one there, added a higher octave here. Then I added a harmony part, which isn't the strongest of harmonies. It ends up hanging on one note a little bit longer than like if I had followed every single note of that melody. So here's what that sounds like. Right? Now, let's blend them in with those two loops, and you'll see what it all sounds like. Right? Now we'll add the drums in for the second half. Well, we'll do the whole thing now. And also, pay attention. First half, the drums, I believe, are on the hi-hat. Second half, they're hitting that crash cymbal over and over and over again. We're just doing exactly what it did in the first bridge. That's sort of a way to sort of connect those two a little bit because they are so left field. I felt like, oh, something should be the same in between the two of them. You know what I mean? So basically made the drum, it's not the same exact pattern, but he goes from the hi-hat to the crash second half, right? So here's the whole bridge. Okay, so one thing that you should notice there is that I let those guitar parts ring out. Always let your guitar parts ring out. But in an effort to connect these two sections, right? Here's another out of nowhere bridge, but then I got to go back into that verse. There has to be something to tie them together. In this particular case, it's literally just that fading electric guitar sound. Let me unmute everything. And I'll let you hear just that end of that bridge and into the last verse. No one is good all of the time, working the box out of the lines. Right, you hear how that connects, and all it is like the artifacts, the remnants of that previous section. We're in the same key, of course, but anyway, that's what I did to sort of tie those pieces together. Now, the last little bit, oh, there was like a, hey, hey, these little kid things down here, Arcade Summer. That's through the night, holding, right? Another loop, super fun. I just wanted something in there because there's a break in the drums. Let me unmute that, or unsolo that rather. So yeah, so there's a break here in the drums. I just wanted something rhythmic to happen that wasn't drums. So I used that kid sound. What makes you strong? What makes you strong won't last through the night. Holding. Okay. And then after that, so that's the only other component we haven't talked about. Then at the end of the song, I just ran the last chorus. It's just those harmonies again. And that was a way to sort of bookend the song, right? So it, you know, I started with the keys thing, but then the really first vocal thing that you heard was those harmonies. So I wanted to bookend it, so it was sort of nicely packaged, beginning to end. I don't always do that. I did it in this particular song. This one, you know, I was working the arrangement a little bit more different than I have before. Started with a chorus. I don't always do that. 2 bridges. I never have ever done that. And 2 bridges that are totally, completely different and from out of nowhere. Never done that. It was super fun and it made a fun song. Lyrically, this song was a little on the lighthearted side, but, you know, sometimes you can't, you know, don't want to sing about your heartbreak all the time. So you guys, that's the mix breakdown of Pushing the Walls. If you haven't checked it out, go ahead and search for the video that came out on Monday. It's in the Music Monday playlist. I hope you enjoyed this video. And again, thanks to Trevor Sanders for the awesome suggestion on a mix breakdown following the video that comes out on Monday. I think that's a good idea and I'm going to keep doing them. If there are other songs that I haven't made mixed breakdowns for that you would like to see, leave them in the comment section below of this one or over on Facebook. Oh, and Instagram. Please join me on Instagram, you guys. My Instagram thing is a little on the sad side. I need more people on Instagram. So come find me on Instagram. Otherwise, yeah, let me know what songs you want to know about the mixes on and I will make videos for you guys. All right, so have an awesome day. Thank you so much for watching. And I'll talk to you guys again on Friday. Peace and love.